In this video from ITFreeTraining, I will be looking at the different editions of Windows Server 2012. Understanding which editions are available and what they can do will allow you to make the right decision on which one to purchase to meet your needs. Windows Server 2012 comes in 4 editions, reduced from 7 editions in Windows Server 2008 R2. The editions are as follows: Foundation, Essentials, Standard, and Data Center. If you are familiar with Windows Server 2008, you will notice that there is no Itanium or HPC edition. Itanium support is effectively dropped, so if you have an Itanium-based system, you will need to use Windows Server 2008 R2 or an alternative operating system. The HPC edition, or High Performance Computing edition, was aimed at providing additional features for companies wanting more scalability and clustering options. With Windows Server 2012, HPC is a free optional download available for the Standard and Data Center editions. 2 of the 4 Windows Server 2012 editions map directly to a Windows Server 2008 edition. That is, Foundation maps directly to Foundation, Data Center maps directly to Data Center. The editions Essentials and Standard do not. The Essential edition has the same functionality as the Standard and Web edition of Windows Server 2008. So, if you were using either of these editions, you would most likely upgrade to the Essentials edition. Upgrading to Windows Server 2012 I will cover in a lot more detail in a later video. If you are using the Enterprise edition of Windows Server 2008, you will most likely upgrade to the Standard edition of Windows Server 2012. Microsoft has reduced the number of editions of Windows Server 2012, making it a lot easier to decide on which edition is right for you, but there are also some other changes that make the process easier. Windows Server 2012 does not support 32-bit. Nowadays, 64-bit hardware is quite common, and it would be difficult to even buy a 32-bit server system in today's market. Most likely, the only place you would find such a system would be on eBay. The next big change in the editions is that you can switch between Full Graphical User's Interface, or GUI, and the Core interface. Core is when Windows is running in a reduced graphical interface that runs the command prompt and only very simple, lightweight GUI applications. In Windows Server 2008, the administrator had to choose between the two when the operating system was installed. Now with Windows Server 2012, the administrator can change from one to the other at any time they desire. In a lot of cases, the administrator may choose to install the full GUI during the configuring of the server. Once they have configured the server, the GUI can be removed. Another option is that they install the core first and later on discover they need additional features that are not included in the core. For example, they need to run remote desktop services on the server, which core does not support. When this occurs, the GUI can simply be added again. I will now have a closer look at each edition so you can make a decision which works best for you. The Foundation edition is a scaled-down edition of Windows Server 2012, and thus the cheapest version of Windows Server 2012 to purchase. Since it is limited to 15 users, it is mainly aimed at small business, file, and print sharing. Unlike the other editions, the Foundation edition defaults to a simple dashboard rather than the Server Manager to perform server configuration. As shown here, the dashboard provides day-to-day functionality, and you can still access the Server Manager if you need to. The main aim of the dashboard is to provide simple links to common administration tasks like adding users, set up a backup, and provide a quick status report of the server, to name just a few of the functions. I will cover the licensing of Windows Server 2012 in a later video. For the present, all you need to know is that Foundation Edition can only be installed on a physical server. It is not licensed to be installed in a virtual machine. The Essentials Edition is, once again, a scaled-down version of Windows Server 2012. Feature-wise, it is much the same as Foundation, except it supports 25 users. Once you purchase the Essentials Edition, you can install one copy on a physical or virtual machine. From a user point of view, The main difference between the two is it defaults to Server Manager rather than the dashboard. The Standard and Data Center editions I have grouped together as they essentially have the same features, or to put it another way, they have all the features of Windows Server 2012. The main difference between the two is how many virtual instances of the operating system you can run without additional licenses. For the Standard Edition, you can run 2 virtual instances. The Data Center differs from this in that it can run an unlimited number of virtual instances. Data Center is designed for large computers with up to 64 processors, so it is not available via retail channels. In order to obtain Data Center, you need to purchase it through an OEM or Microsoft licensing plan. It should be pointed out that Standard and Data Center are licensed by how many users connect to it. I will cover licensing in a later video, but essentially, for each user that uses the server, you need to purchase a CAL. This covers the basics for each edition. Next, I will compare the editions side by side to see the limitations of each edition, which ultimately affect which edition you purchase. Shown here are the limitations that are built into each edition of Windows Server 2012. To start with, which edition you choose will be determined by how many CPUs you can use. Foundation is limited to 1 CPU, while Essentials allows 2 CPUs to be used. The Standard and Data Center editions support 64 CPUs. For the RAM, Foundation supports 32 GB, Essentials supports 64 GB, while Standard and Data Center support 4 TB if you can find a motherboard that supports that much RAM. The max users limitation will limit how many users can connect to and access services like file shares or printing. You can see that Foundation is limited to 15, which makes it suitable for a small office. Essentials is limited to 25. Standard and Data Center have no limit on how many users can connect to the server. It should be pointed out that the Foundation and Essentials editions require no additional licenses in order to support these users. In the upcoming licensing video, we will see that Standard and Data Center require additional licenses depending on how many users connect to that server. With Foundation and Essentials, you may be limited to how many users can use the server, but at least there are no additional costs. The next limitation is routing and remote access. If you are using the server for VPN access or as a router, Foundation will be limited to 50 connections, while Essentials will be limited to 250. Standard and Data Centers support an unlimited number of connections. The next limitation is with Active Directory services. Foundation and Essentials only allow Active Directory services to be used for the root domain controller in a domain that has no trusts. Essentially, the idea is that Foundation and Essentials Active Directory services are there to help with migrations. If you want to use Active Directory services, you should consider the Standard or Data Center editions. The next limitation is with Active Directory certificate services. While the Standard and Data Center editions support all the components of Active Directory certificate services, Foundation and Essentials only support the main component of certificates, which is the Certificate Authority component. This will allow the server to issue certificates. However, it will not provide additional options like deploying certificates using the web. The next limitation is the Foundation and Essentials editions do not support Hyper-V or Server Core. If you want to use either of these roles, you will need to use the Standard or Data Center edition. The last limitation is with Distributed File Services, or DFS. DFS allows the administrator to create a single file structure containing many different file shares on many different servers. It also supports replication between different file shares. The Foundation and Essentials are limited to one standalone DFS root. Standalone means the DFS root relies on one server rather than storing the DFS in Active Directory. This means that if the server that is holding this DFS root were to fail, all shares in that DFS would not be available. Foundation and Essentials support one standalone DFS root, while Standard and Data Center support an unlimited number and also allow the DFS root to be stored in Active Directory. This covers it for the different editions of Windows Server 2012. I hope you have found this video informative. If you want to see more free videos from us, please feel free to subscribe or visit our website.